Hi everybody, welcome to Coding Beta. Today we're going to be talking about route model binding. So route model binding is when you have a URL or a route that has a variable defined in the URL, and you want to take the value of that variable, query the database, and return an instance of whatever model that may be, rather than just having the identifier itself available to you. So it's a real handy way to automatically kind of pull in the model that you need so you can get right into your business logic. So you can imagine if you had a, slash users slash user ID, and you don't just want the ID of that user, you can query the database, get that user model, and have that available to you in your controller. So I'm going to hop over to code here and we can have a look. So I've created a couple migrations here. So I'm creating a users table and a companies table. The users table is pretty straightforward. I have our ID. I also am creating this unique string of key. This is to show that you can customize how we're querying the database. So you might not always be using a auto-incrementing ID. Instead, you might have some sort of hash of an ID, or you might have a title that you're creating for a blog or something, and you want those keywords in the URL. So that's what that key is for, and a little bit later we can show you how you can customize it to query off this key rather than the ID. Other than that, we've got the company ID for the user, and then just a name and email. Our companies table is even simpler. We just have the ID, again, that unique key, and a name. So I'm going to go ahead and run php artisan migrate, and that should get our database set up for us. And then I also have this database seeder. And here I'm just creating a couple of companies. So I have the like company, the subscribe company, and I have one user, Joe YouTuber, and he is a member of the first company. So in this case, he's a member of the like company. So I'm gonna do php artisan db seed, and after that runs, we should have our database set up, all of our data, and we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and hop over to our routes file, and I can show you how this all works. So we're going to get started here. We're going to create a new route. Let's just say company slash, and then here we're going to define that variable. So we're going to have a company variable, and we're going to pass that into a function. We'll use company for the name of the variable there as well. And to start with, let's just dump and die with what that company is. So here is how you define a variable within a route, and whatever you name the variable here, whatever value gets passed in is going to be assigned to this variable here, and we're just going to dump and die that so you can see that that's set up and working. So if we go back to our website and we do /company/1, you can see that 1 is being output, and whatever value gets passed in to that variable there is being output. So everything's kind of wired up and working there. So now how would we turn this into route model binding? It's actually very straightforward. So all we need to do is on this company variable here, we just need to type hint that and tell Laravel which model should that variable represent. So in this case, it's a company model. So we're going to do app company. And just by type hinting that now, it's going to take the value and do a database query and return the model for us. So if I reload here, now we've got this company object instead of our identifier. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. I also set up a quick view just to make things look a little bit nicer as we go through this. So I'm going to call the view or the company blade file, and we're going to pass in the company variable to that. So now if we reload the page, we should have, okay, so there's the company, and I'm just outputting the name of the company right there. If we go to company 2, then now we've got the please subscribe company. If we go to company 3, which does not exist, then we're going to get a 404. because it's querying the database, and actually I can show you that in our toolbar. It is trying to query the company's table for that ID. It's not finding it, so it's automatically returning a 404 for us. So let's go back to our company one here, our Like This Video Association, and show you how we want to use that key. So if we, right now it's querying the database off of that ID. If we want to query the database off of a different field, there's a couple ways to do that. One is right here in this variable, we can just add a colon, and then we can tell it which field in the database we want to search off of. So if we want to search off of the key, then if we go back and reload, now we're going to get a 404 because there is no key one. But if we pass in like, then we get the like. And if we pass in subscribe, then we get the subscribe. So it's now querying off of the key rather than the identifier. You could imagine a scenario where you have a lot of routes that are using the company, and you have to kind of pass in this key every single time, and you might wish, rather than having to type that over and over again, I wish it could just default to always querying off the key. And you can actually do that if you open up the company model itself. You can create a new function, get route key name. And this function, if you just return the string of which field from the database you want to search after. So just by doing that, again, if we go back to our routes file right now, I am not telling it which field to use here. So now everything's still working. I can still visit the like company, or I can still go to the subscribe company, and everything's working. So that's kind of how route model binding works. Those are the two different ways to customize what field in the database you're searching after. So a new feature with route model binding that they added in Laravel 7 is scoped route models. And what that is let's say, so we have our company, but let's say we want to drill down to the user of a company. So you can say, okay, company, and then we pass in the company, then we do users / and the user. So then I'm gonna do the same thing here, and I'm gonna type hint the user. So now we're getting both the route model binding is happening both for the company and for the user here. And you can see that if I go back to our page, we've got, oops, so now I've got to pass in, so it's the company and then user, did I name it user or users? Okay, users / and it was fan-1 was the identifier, I believe. Let's go back to our database seeder and see what we set that at. Fan-1. Oh, but we're not telling it to use the key for the user. We're using the ID right now, so that's just going to be 1. Okay, so now you can see we're at the please subscribe company and that user. Again, if we look at the queries in our debug bar, you can see that it's selecting the companies because we are using that custom route key name. It's using the key. And for the users, it's just looking off of the identifier. Let's change the company from subscribe to the like company. And you can see we've got the same thing going on where it's searching for the company, it's searching for the user, it's returning both of the results. However, if you remember back from our database seeder, we're kind of setting up that Joe YouTuber is a member of the like company and not the subscribe company. So really, we probably don't want, if we're on the subscribe, this really probably should not exist because this user does not exist as a member of this company. We'd probably want a 404 here realistically. So The way with Laravel 7 with their scoped routes, what you can do is anytime you have these kind of nested variables, if you put in a field for the second variable that you're telling it that you want to search off of, just by adding this in, and you can see here I'm not even changing it. It was looking off of ID before. I'm still explicitly telling it to look off of ID. But just by passing that in, it is now going to scope itself to the company. So it's going to make sure that the company ID matches for the user as well. So if we go back and we reload this page, now we are getting a 404. And you can see here that our user's query, it's now looking where the user's company ID is 2 and the user's ID is 1. Since that doesn't exist, we're getting that 404. If I go back to the like company, now it's pulling up fine because Joe YouTuber is a member of the Like This Video Association. So again, it's scoping that user to that company, and that's happening for us automatically just because we have defined this explicitly here. It doesn't have to be the ID. We could change this to key, and then we could go back over here and we could pass in fan-1 was the identifier, and if we look here, it's still doing the scoping correctly. Now it's searching off of the key because that's what we told it to do. But you do have to kind of explicitly define it right here for this to work. So if I were to delete this and go to our user model and instead do public function get route key name and pass in, or I'm sorry, return the key there. Now when I reload this page, you can see even though it's querying off of the key the same, it's now no longer scoped. It's just saying select from users where the key is fan1. So if I go to the subscribe company, this is now going to work when it shouldn't. So even if you have these route key names set up in your models, if you want to have the scoped models, you do need to explicitly define it again in your route. So now we'll get the 404 now that we're explicitly telling it to be scoped because we're telling it to search off the key there. So yeah, that's the basics of the route model binding and scoped route models. I guess one other thing, so let's look, so our user model, we are telling it that the default is to use the key, but I wonder if I go over here, and even though the user's default is key, if I tell it ID here, I'm betting this is going to override and it's going to search off of ID. Let's look and see if that's the case. And so we're getting a 404 there. If we pass in the identifier of 1, now it's pulling up. So yes, that is the case that the routes file inline definition is always going to override whatever you have defined in your route key name. So all right, well, that's it for today's video. Hopefully that was useful, and we will see you next time.